Hi, I'm making a video to let you know that killer bees are fake, and I'm serious. The so-called killer bee is supposed to be from Africa. Now, this was invented in 1957 by the Brazilian dictatorship government of the time to discredit Professor Warwick Kerr, who was protesting the government because they'd raped nuns. He was in prison for 3 years, and when he got out, they made up a story about training African bees from savage Africa to invade people's homes at night, to sting military personnel, which was preposterous and can't be done. It took many years before horror films started to adopt this African bee, killer bee thing, but science proves otherwise. The so-called African killer bee is actually from Europe. It's Apis mellifera. Look it up yourself. They're not even sure of the subspecies name. They used to call it Apis mellifera adonsai. Now they call it Apis mellifera scutellata. They're not even sure of the color. Now every other subspecies of Apis mellifera has a color, and that's because they didn't have DNA when they decided on these subspecies. But the killer bee can be any color, the only one. In my opinion, that is also very stupid. But the colors of honeybees dictate adaptive radiation, which definitely makes them survive better. The yellower bees reflect sunlight better than the darker bees, so the yellower bees were farther south. Hence the Italian bee and the Mediterranean area of northern Africa was where your so-called Apis mellifera langustica occurred, which is known as the Italian bee. In northern Europe was the carniolan, which was gray, and then farther north in Europe, past northern Italy, where the carniolan was, once you pass Italy, you get the ordinary Apis mellifera, which is the dark bee, also known as the black bee. And what's irritating about the lie about the killer bee is that it's European and it is not African. There's only 3 races of honeybees. That's Apis dorsata, Apis cerana, and Apis mellifera. And Apis mellifera has never crossed with another race. It can't. And Apis mellifera is a very gentle bee naturally, and even when kept in Africa, it's very gentle. You have to use smoke around them if you really want them to stay gentle when you have a large number of bees. I've had not a large number, but I've worked large numbers of bees. I've only owned up to 50 beehives. But I've worked many more than that, and I've been keeping bees for a long time. I'm 52 years old, and I've been in the Africanized killer bee quarantine zone down in South Texas in the 90s, when they made the migratory commercial beekeepers drop their hives and leave them where they sat, where they ended up getting sprayed in the fields of cotton and died. And then they finally said, you know, this is ridiculous. Let's stop these quarantines, because what they said was going to happen hasn't happened. The bees haven't gotten more aggressive. They haven't started doing crazy things. They're just the same old bee because they're not another race. It's Apis mellifera. Subspecies are not races. They do not hybridize bees with subspecies, regardless. It's just the same bee, Apis mellifera. And as far as the testing done, it wasn't done with DNA, because you can't DNA them. They're Apis mellifera, period. And the test was called the FABIS test, Fast Africanized Bee Identification System. And the FABIS test, F-A-B-I-S, was simply measurement of the combs. That's absolutely ridiculous and doesn't do a thing, because domestic production of honeybees is usually put on artificial wax frame comb, which is made with a larger cell than they naturally make themselves. Naturally, honeybees all make a small cell, much smaller, well, not much smaller, but a lot smaller than the domestic store-bought comb that some people put them on. Most people put them on, and all people used to put them on in the 1990s. This new foundation-free beekeeping is something that we just started doing lately, but used to be everyone put them on foundation. So when the government came out with their USDA people and tested the honeybees in South Texas, they would check the comb size and they would say, oh, it's small cell, it's got to be a killer bee. That means they're positive. And of course, with a smaller cell, you're going to get a slightly smaller bee. So the only way they really knew that a honeybee was an African killer bee was, oh, it's a smaller sized bee, so it must be. It can be any color, it can be anywhere, it can act any way, but it's a killer bee if it's a smaller bee. Ridiculous. Because that just meant they made their own comb. A honeybee makes its own comb, it's smaller, and the cell is smaller. I've been complaining about that for 25 years when they were setting traps all around my place back in Texas and testing positive African bees and all that, and then that was ridiculous because after 25 years now they're saying, well, we can do some kind of DNA testing. Fabbis isn't the only way. Well, why did you do it? That's stupid. All that did was say that they were wild bees, period. And for those of you, you want to say feral, well, prove to me that they're not native. Come on. And if you just want to watch that History Channel, you can see from ancient mega forts, ancient mega cities, whatever, it might be one before the other, but they got it, where they're showing Mayan Indians putting honeybees in mannequins thousands of years ago as stinging sentinels. And you need to watch that if you think bees aren't native to North America, because these are scientists showing honeybees taken from regular beehives put inside of these mannequins to reenact the thing. If you go to my other video called Honeybees Are Native to North America, you'll see, I'll show you where you can find that movie, that film. Anyway, yes, definitely honeybees are not killer bees. There are no such thing as Apis mellifera becoming an Africanized killer bee. It's ridiculous, I promise you. And the people that make the videos are not using smoke. They're sensationalizing the video with graphics, and they're using sound effects. I have been a beekeeper for 52 years, and I know what I'm talking about, and I have been through all this. Yes, they went to my school in the 1970s in Southern California and told us that by 1976 the killer bees will have taken over the North American countryside and it won't be safe to even walk around outside. And that they were doing everything in their power to try to kill off the killer bees before they got here. Well, maybe that's where the GMO varroa mite came from. Maybe that's where all these diseases came from. Maybe it was all the store-bought research that we've paid for to stop the fake killer bees. Well, that's just preposterous. That couldn't be. No one could be that evil and stupid. But the point I'm making is that killer bees are fake. No ands, ifs, or buts. Do the research. Can't even make up their mind whether it's Apis mellifera scutellata or Apis mellifera adonsi. Can't make up their mind on what color it is. Only test done is the Fabbis test, which only measures cell size and size of bee, which any honeybee is going to be smaller in the wild than it is on domestic foundation wax. It's just totally preposterous. Oh, and how aggressive they must be. Then why in the world don't they have this problem in Africa and Southern Europe? And why don't they have this problem anywhere else but North America? It's ridiculous. And on top of that, think about it. Didn't the Romans constantly trade with Egypt? Isn't Egypt northern Africa? Didn't they constantly cross the Mediterranean? I mean, this has been going on for thousands upon thousands of years. They had to move live bees and skeps back and forth. This is ridiculous to think that the first time you ever brought a queen bee from Africa and mixed it with a European was Dr. Warwick Kerr, who was actually Professor Warwick Kerr. Anyway, the whole story is junk. I'm telling you the truth.